I'm now excited to welcome, for her first Catalyst Awards conference ever, Catalyst President and CEO Lorraine Hariton, who's going to be engaging in a conversation with Zain, anchor from CNN International. I know it's going to be a great discussion, so please join me in welcoming them both.
Julie, thank you so much, and thank you to everyone at Catalyst who I'm honored to be here today. And I was actually just telling you, Lorraine, a little bit earlier that I've always been interested and aware of just how uneven the playing field is between men and women in the workplace, but nothing more than having a baby and being a mother really highlighted that for me. It made it so much more personal. My son is 6 months old, and like many mothers, I'm sure in this room, I'll be honest, I would say I'm struggling a little bit to balance having a very stressful job, being an anchor, and also being a mother at the same time. I was telling you that, I've had to, there have been times when, I've been pumping at work, and I'll get a call saying, there's breaking news, there's been a car bomb in Northern Ireland or wherever. We need you to go to set right now. And literally with milk stains on my shirt, I have to run to the studio. And I'm telling the director, please zoom in so the audience cannot see the milk stains on my shirt. So obviously there does need to be change. I don't have all the answers, but that is why you're here. So you have been leader of Catalyst for about 6 months now. Congratulations on the new gig.
Thank you so much.
Prior to Catalyst, you worked at a lot of male-dominated companies. What was it that inspired you? Having worked at so many companies that are dominated by men, what was it that inspired you to dedicate your career to helping the advancement of women?
Well, Zain, I love the story that you started with, because my career also has been one of a balancing act between family and work, and doing that successfully. And I entered the workplace in 1977 working for IBM, and the world was quite a bit of a different place at that time. I was on the heels of the women's movement, and we were very much wanting to be, to prove that women could be successful. And IBM was a wonderful place to work for, even in those days. They had very progressive policies about women in the workplace. We had great role models, and they really valued us. But the workplace was really a different place. Like having career and family, I took an 8-week maternity leave with my first child and 6 weeks with the second child. So I've felt like I really had a commitment to pay it forward. And I've done that throughout my career. I've been on the boards of the Watermark, which was the leading women's organization in Silicon Valley, when I was an entrepreneur and an executive there. When I was at the State Department, I created programs for women in entrepreneurship around the world. And then most recently, I was involved with women in STEM. So I really felt that, especially coming into business at the time that I did, that this was something that...
It's almost as if everything that you've done with your life has really prepared you.
Really, you know what?
For this job.
That's really true. And when I was interviewing for the job, one of the board members, Jackie Hinman, said to me, I bet you feel like you've been preparing for this all of your life. And that's exactly how I feel. I feel like so much of what I've done is really prepared me for this job. And this is such a wonderful platform at such an important time to really pay it forward.
This particular conference is about the future at work. How can any leader like yourself transform a culture to make it more inclusive, do you think?
Well, in terms of the future at work in general, we are going to spend a lot of time at this conference talking about the trends in the future of work. Technology, globalization, migration paths, all of this says that we have to have more inclusive environment, because it's going to be more diverse, talent shortages are going to be there, and we've got to understand how to work together So Catalyst has really dedicated our work over the last 56 years to understanding what it means to be able to make workplaces that work for women and work for everyone, to have really inclusive environments. So we have a lot of vehicles for doing that. I think our 4 award winners today really are great examples. There's a lot we can learn from each other about what it takes to build an inclusive environment. What Schneider Electric just talked about, I think, is really inspiring, how they've really looked at what are all the needs that women have so that they can really create an environment that allows them to be successful. And as I think about it, in the 1970s, when I went in, just the suits that we had to wear. When I went on maternity, when I was pregnant, I had to order a maternity business suit with a bow tie out of a catalog so that I would have the right outfit for IBM in the 80s. So things have changed a lot, and we have a lot more flexibility, and I think that's wonderful.
So things have changed a lot, but there's still more work that needs to be done.
There's definitely still work to be done.
Every single woman, I shouldn't say every, but I imagine, I can't speak for everybody in this room, but I imagine that a lot of women in this room have experienced some kind of bias, especially minority women as well, some kind of bias in the workplace. Have you ever experienced bias? Talk to us about that, and also what you think leaders should be doing to address bias in the workplace.
Well, I think everyone experiences bias. There's bias on gender, race, and ethnicity. I think that we need to increase awareness of that bias for everyone, and then give very concrete ways that it can be addressed in the workplace. So we recently launched the a campaign, hashtag Bias Correct. I don't know how many of you have seen that campaign. Yay! We're really excited about that campaign. In fact, we're in bus shelters all around the city, so if you're in town, you might see them. They're really fun. And we did that with the Burns Group. It's very innovative, and it really is focused on how do we make people aware of bias. In that campaign, we took a number of words, and in mine is aggressive versus assertive. And we have Escalera, a company that we partner with, actually has a sort of a bias corrector that you can put in your chat groups. And that's really raising awareness.
These people don't oftentimes realize that they're being biased, do they?
Well, they don't, but I think we can make them aware of it. And then a lot of companies are doing unconscious bias training, but even more than that, we've got to build cultures that enable people to interrupt bias in the moment. So, and that's what Catalyst is trying to do.
We've heard a lot in the news about the Me Too movement, and with the Me Too movement comes this sort of belief that there are a lot of men in the workplace who are getting it wrong in terms of how they address that issue. Can you give any examples of how male leaders in the workplace are actually getting it right when it comes to dealing with Me Too?
Well, the Me Too movement, in some ways, has been really important for the work at Catalyst, because it really highlights that we still have systemic issues in the workplace that we need to be addressed. But the reality is, despite what the media may have us believe,
Wow.
most men really want to help. They really want to be able to be part of the solution, but they just don't know how to participate. So, we are providing training. In fact, we have a very successful program called Men Advocating Real Change, or MARC, which helps men understand the issues that still exist in the workplace, unconscious bias, stereotypes that exist, allows them to feel comfortable, to build empathy around these situations, and gives them experience on how they can actually interrupt these biases and support women, be mentors and sponsors for women, and really participate in that. And I think this gives them the tools that they need to be effective.
One other issue that every single workplace is dealing with, as we just saw addressed with our earlier panel, is the gender pay gap. I'm from the UK, and the British government mandated that every single company that has 250 or more employees has to post online how much they pay men on average versus women. And it was quite embarrassing for a lot of companies, because you have all these companies in the UK that their CEOs go out and they speak in public when the lights are on and the cameras are flashing about the importance of diversity and equality. Meantime, in their own company, you're seeing massive pay gaps between men and women. And the BBC, the way they handled it was somewhat controversial. The pay gap between men and women in the BBC was so vast that they decided to address it by trying to pay the men less, which everybody was like, what? Anyway, so what would you say should be done to eradicate the pay gap between men and women in the United States?
I very much appreciate you mentioning this issue, because it's an issue that I feel very passionate about, and I think something that Catalyst has a position on. You know, I actually yesterday, the Australian gender agency that deals with pay gap visited me, and I was in the UK about a month ago where that was the top issue, and I was in Canada where so in Australia, they for 5 years had a requirement to publish gender pay gap issues, and they have a lot of experience with it. And in the UK, the data is, there's a gross measure when you compare pay. The pay gap is affected by both whether you're paying the same for equal performance, for equal work, but also it's affected by the pyramid. How many people do you have at different levels in the organization? So it's the combination of those two that are affecting things. So even if you get to equal gender pay, you still have this issue. And in Canada, they're struggling with exactly how are they going to implement this. So I think that it's an important measure on both of those accounts, and that companies need to start to get prepared in the United States as well for addressing this. Now, there are companies who've done a very good job. For example, Salesforce went through and looked at equity across their whole organization, and they increased the women's pay.
Good.
So companies need to be proactive to get ahead of this.
It's also interesting because I sometimes think that the issue is so difficult, because I have a coworker at CNN who had just confided in me that, you know, she's probably one of the best producers at her job, and she confided in me that she'd never had the courage in 10 years to ever ask for a raise. And I've always wondered, when you have a situation where somebody doesn't have either the belief in themselves or the confidence to go up and ask for a raise, and they're a woman, and as a result, there's a massive pay gap at a company between both genders, is that then the company's fault? Because the company could easily argue, well, she didn't come and ask for a raise, so how is that our fault? And so, as a woman myself, I've also really worked hard to make sure that I understand my value and I can communicate that value as well to others. I also think that's part of the journey we as women have to go through as well.
Well, you know, we have laws that say there should be equal pay.
Right.
And companies who are going to attract and retain the best women need to make sure that they implement those practices.
Right. So how do we ensure that technology doesn't bake in biases? Because, you know, it's not just about my industry or your industry, it's also in STEM roles. We need to advance women in the STEM roles as well. How do we ensure that technology doesn't bake in the biases?
You know, I've spent most of my life in Silicon Valley in the tech industry, and I see opportunity and risk with technology, as there always is. So on the positive side, we can use technology for good. For example, the plugin that Escalera did that interrupts bias in chat and gives you an alternative word is a great way of showing using technology for that benefit. Alternatively, there's examples of where technology increases the bias. In fact, in the clinical trials, classically, they were only using men to do clinical trials. So then they had to bring women in so that you get rid of the bias. So as we start to think about technology being more closely aligned through AI and robots in the workplace, we really have to have teams that are thinking about diversity, and diversity and inclusion is going to be even more important to make sure we don't build in these biases.
And how important is, I mean, just talk to us about the difference between a sponsor and a mentor. How important is it to have somebody that sponsors you or mentors you at any given company, and also you yourself paying it forward? Have you had a female role model that has helped you get where you are today?
That's a great question. So a sponsor is someone who's in a place to actually help you move ahead in your career. A mentor is someone who can help you with the discussions and advise you. So both mentors and sponsors can be very important to you, but a sponsor is someone who can really make that difference. Now, I've had some really great sponsors, and when I was at IBM, when I was pregnant with my second child, I was working for the head of sales, and he promoted me while I was out on maternity leave. He put me as the branch manager in the office that was right near where I worked, and he actually moved the other branch manager up to San Francisco and held the job open to me so that I could have that job. Now, that's really true sponsorship, and I really appreciate that. And, you know, of course, I try to do that with many people that I've known in my career as well.
Because it's very important to pay it forward, and women sort of taking care of other women in the workplace, and making sure that you foster relationships and nurture them too. So how can male-dominated organizations and industries better, I mean, you've worked in so many male-dominated industries, how can they better help women advance in the workplace, do you think?
Well, I'd like to give an example of our dinner sponsor, Chevron, and Mike Worth, who's the CEO. So Mike was the head of all the ERGs on his way up to the top, and he decided that we really need to get men more involved in the conversation if we want to have more women. And of course, he understood that in an engineering-oriented organization, there needs to be even more proactive involvement to make sure that women both come into the organization but are retained in the organization. So he adopted our MARC, or our Men Advocating Real Change program. He actually adapted it to Chevron and created something called MARC Teams, which are like lean-in groups for men, and now some women are in them as well, where they really can talk and dialogue about these issues, and he advocated that. Chevron, in addition, had really brought a lot of the learnings back to us and has given us our largest grant ever of $5 million thank you, to scale these programs across the world.
And final question before we open it up to the audience. What would you say, what is your future vision for the workplace, and how should Catalyst help achieve that?
Well, I think we have an extraordinary moment in time right now. First of all, the focus on this issue is greater than it's been in any time since I entered the workplace in the 70s on the heels of the women's movement. But more importantly than that, we have some really major changes happening in the workplace. That's why this conference is all about the future at work. We have a major generational change that's changing the nature of the workforce and changing the values. But we also have changes in technology and migration patterns on globalization. So I think we have an opportunity together to really work on a future that is more equitable, more inclusive, and really fulfilling for everyone, not just for women. So I think together Catalyst has this opportunity to convene so many great companies that are thinking about the future of work, and to make sure we create the future of work that really does accomplish that.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.
So, does anybody have any questions for Lorraine? I'm trying to see without my glasses if anyone is raising their hand. No? Okay. Do I see anyone? So, just talk to us a bit more about leadership, because when you're in a